Section 1 of the 14 orations against Marcus Antonius, called Philippics. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. The Philippics, by Marcus Tullius Cicero. The first Philippic. The argument. When Julius, or as he is usually called by Cicero, Gaius Caesar, was slain on the 15th of March, ab urbe condita 710, B.C. 44, Marcus Antonius was his colleague in the consulship, and he, being afraid that the conspirators might murder him too, and it is said that they had debated among themselves whether they would or no, concealed himself on that day and fortified his house, till, perceiving that nothing was intended against him, he ventured to appear in public the day following. Lepidus was in the suburbs of Rome with a regular army, ready to depart for the government of Spain, which had been assigned to him with a part of Gaul. In the night, after Caesar's death, he occupied the Forum with his troops, and thought of making himself master of the city. But Antonius dissuaded him from that idea, and won him over to his views by giving his daughter in marriage to Lepidus his son, and by assisting him to seize on the office of Pontifex Maximus, which was vacant by Caesar's death. To the conspirators he professed friendship, sent his son among them as a hostage of his sincerity, and so deluded them that Brutus supped with Lepidus, and Cassius with Antonius. By these means he got them to consent to his passing a decree for the confirmation of all of Caesar's acts, without describing or naming them more precisely. At last, on the occasion of Caesar's public funeral, he contrived so to inflame the populace against the conspirators, that Brutus and Cassius had some difficulty in defending their houses and their lives, and he gradually alarmed them so much, and worked so cunningly on their fears, that they all quitted Rome. Cicero also left Rome, disapproving greatly of the vacillation and want of purpose in the conspirators. On the 1st of June, Antonius assembled the Senate to deliberate on the affairs of the Republic, and in the interval visited all the parts of Italy. In the meantime, young Octavius appeared on the stage. He had been left by Caesar, who was his uncle, the heir to his name and estate. He returned from Apollonia and Macedonia to Italy as soon as he heard of his uncle's death, and arrived at Naples on the 18th of April, where he was introduced by Hirtius and Pansa to Cicero, whom he promised to be guided in all respects by his directions. He was now between 18 and 19 years of age. He began by the representation of public spectacles and games in honor of Caesar's victories. In the meantime, Antonius, in his progress through Italy, was making great use of the decree confirming all Caesar's acts, which he interpolated and forged in the most shameless manner. Among other things, he restored Deiotarus to all his dominions, having been bribed to do so by 100 millions of sesterces by the king's agents. But Deiotarus himself, as soon as he had heard of Caesar's death, seized all his dominions by force. He also seized the public treasure which Caesar had deposited in the temple of Ops, amounting to over 4 millions and a half of our money, and with this he won over Dolabella, who had seized the consulship on the death of Caesar, and the greater part of the army. At the end of May, Cicero began to return towards Rome, in order to arrive there in time for the meeting of the Senate on the 1st of June, but many of his friends dissuaded him from entering the city, and at last he determined not to appear in the Senate on that day, but to make a tour of Greece, to assist him in which Dolabella named him as one of his lieutenants. Antonius also gave Brutus and Cassius commissions to buy corn in Asia and Sicily for the use of the Republic, in order to keep them out of the city. Meanwhile, Sextus Pompeius, who was at the head of a considerable army in Spain, addressed letters to the consuls proposing terms of accommodation, which, after some debate and some important modifications, were agreed to, and he quitted Spain and came as far as Marseilles on his road towards Rome. Cicero, having started for Greece, was forced to put back by contrary winds, and returned to Velia on the 17th of August, where he had a long conference with Brutus, who soon after left Italy for his province of Macedonia, which Caesar had assigned him before his death, though Antonius now wished to compel him to exchange it for Crete. After this conference, Cicero returned to Rome, where he was received with unexampled joy, immense multitudes thronging out to meet him, and to escort him into the city. He arrived in Rome on the last day of August. The next day the Senate met. to which he was particularly summoned by Antonius, but he excused himself as not having yet recovered from the fatigue of his journey. Antonius was greatly offended, and in his speech in the Senate threatened openly to order his house to be pulled down, the real reason of Cicero's absenting himself from the Senate being that the business of the day was to decree some new and extraordinary honors to Caesar, and to order supplications to him as a divinity, which Cicero was determined not to concur in, though he knew it to be useless to oppose them. The next day also the Senate met, and Antonius absented himself. But Cicero came down and delivered the following speech, which is the first in that celebrated series of 14 speeches made in opposition to Antonius and his measures, called Philippics, from the orations of Demosthenes against Philip, to which the Romans were in the habit of comparing them. The first Philippic. Before, O conscript fathers, I say those things concerning the Republic which I think myself bound to say at the present time, I will explain to you briefly the cause of my departure from, and of my return to, the city. When I hoped that the Republic was at last recalled to a proper respect for your wisdom and for your authority, I thought it became me to remain in a sort of sentinelship, which was imposed upon me by my position as a senator and a man of consular rank. Nor did I depart anywhere, nor did I ever take my eyes off the Republic, from the day on which we were summoned to meet in the temple of Tellus, in which temple I, as far as was in my power, laid the foundations of peace, and renewed the ancient precedent set by the Athenians. I have ever used the Greek word, which that city employed in those times in allaying discords, and gave my vote that all recollection of the existing dissensions ought to be effaced by everlasting oblivion. The oration then made by Marcus Antonius was an admirable one. His dispositions, too, appeared excellent. And lastly, by his means and by his sons, peace was ratified with the most illustrious of the citizens, and everything else was consistent with this beginning. He invited the chief men of the state to those deliberations which he held at his own house concerning the state of the Republic. He referred all the most important matters to this order. Nothing was at this time found among the papers of Gaius Caesar except what was already well known to everybody, and he gave answers to every question that was asked of him with the greatest consistency. Were any exiles restored? He said that one was, but only one. Were any immunities granted? He answered none. He wished us even to adopt the proposition of Servius Sulpicius, that most illustrious man, that no tablet purporting to contain any decree or grant of Caesar's should be published after the Ides of March were expired. I pass over many other things, all excellent, for I am hastening to come to a very extraordinary act of virtue of Marcus Antonius. He utterly abolished from the constitution of the Republic the dictatorship, which had by this time obtained the authority of regal power, and that measure was not even offered to us for discussion. He brought with him a decree of the Senate, ready drawn up, ordering what he chose to have done, and when it had been read, we all submitted to his authority in the matter with the greatest eagerness, and, by another resolution of the Senate, we returned him thanks in the most honorable and complimentary language. A new light, as it were, seemed to have been brought over us now that not only the kingly power which we had endured, but all fear of such power for the future was taken away from us, and a great pledge appeared to have been given by him to the Republic that he did wish the city to be free, when he utterly abolished out of the Republic the name of dictator, which had often been a legitimate title, on account of our late recollection of a perpetual dictatorship. A few days afterwards the Senate was delivered from the danger of bloodshed, and a hook was fixed into that runaway slave who had usurped the name of Gaius Marius. And all these things he did in concert with his colleague. Some other things that were done were the acts of Dolabella alone, but if his colleague had not been absent would, I believe, have been done by both of them in concert. For when enormous evil was insinuating itself into the Republic, and was gaining more strength day by day, and when the same men were erecting a tomb in the Forum, who had performed that irregular funeral, and when abandoned men, with slaves like themselves, were every day threatening with more and more vehemence all the houses and temples of the city, So severe was the rigor of Dolabella, not only towards the audacious and wicked slaves, but also towards the profligate and unprincipled